We're coming to the home stretch of the time that you and I have spent together looking at the Persian era of the Bible. That's the first part of Ezra. Then Esther happens next. Then the second part of Ezra, and then the book of Nehemiah. That's the chronological narrative stuff from this era, roughly 600-ish BC to 440-ish BC. It's super interesting, super juicy. The tone of the writing and the storytelling is a little different than the older stuff of the Old Testament. You know, the style of storytelling and language evolves over time. This is reflective of that. We see a lot of these very colorful characters we've met here in extra-biblical sources, and they're very colorful in the extra-biblical sources as well. We get inside the heads of the characters. We see their flaws more closely, the flaws of the good guys and the bad guys more closely. We see the people evolve and change and grow, and they go through a metamorphosis in terms of character as well. It's just super interesting, good stuff. And all of it, again, happens against the backdrop of the Persian Empire. And we know a few things about them. We know a few things about what they believed and what they were into. And if you remember, I think we covered this all the way back in Esther last season. One of the really interesting things about Persian culture and belief is that they primarily practiced Zoroastrianism, but it was a version of that that was mingled with Achaemenidism, a version of the religion that was propped up and promoted and proliferated by the Achaemenid kings of Persia. Here's what I mean by that. Within Zoroastrianism, the chief god is Ahura Mazda, and there's a big disdain for lying in that ancient version of that religion. Well, you'll recall there was an ugly transition of power from the founder of the Achaemenid dynasty, that is Cyrus the Great, who conquered Babylon in 539 BC and allowed the Jews under Zerubbabel to return and rebuild Jerusalem in 538 BC. This guy, he wasn't done in the 530s BC. He wanted to go conquer more things. Cyrus eventually met his match way up north, where a warrior queen bested him on the battlefield and severed his head and put in a bag of wine. And the history of this stuff is all in color. It's all very interesting. Well, after Cyrus dies, his son Cambyses takes over, but he has another son, Bardia, who is the big chief governor of the East, and Cambyses gets mixed results out of his reign. He conquers Egypt, but he dies of a self-inflicted lance wound while getting on his horse in Syria. As lance bearer is a kid named Darius, who would become Darius the Great, the king, who was only distantly related to Cyrus and his family. And so Darius comes up with a plan with a handful of other guys to ride roughshod across the empire back to where Bardia is and to kill him, because Darius decides that the reality of the situation is that there's a shapeshifter who killed Bardia, the rightful heir, and he looks like Bardia now because of the shapeshifting. Then so Darius, he has got to go kill this shapeshifter impersonating Bardia and with a heavy heart become king himself. And so he does that. He succeeds in all of it. And immediately from the word go, it's the false king is dead. Long live the new king, Darius. And the false king was indeed a magician, shapeshifter, liar. Everyone needs to know this. Hear ye, spread the word to all horizons. And so this narrative gets spread everywhere with force and propaganda money behind it to say, Darius is the rightful king. He purged the empire of the lie carried out by the shapeshifter who assumed the role of Bardia, and Darius is the preserver of the line of kings, and he, though distantly related, will be the next in the line of the Achaemenid kings, and he will carry forward the unbroken tradition of Persia. And because of this rather wobbly claim to the throne, Darius becomes obsessed with this Zoroastrian notion of lies and truth, and he frames this as a religious issue. If you believe Darius's account, you are on the side of the truth and the light and that which defeats the lie. Darius had this carved on a gigantic mountain to tell everybody that that was the case in a whole bunch of different languages. You can still see it today if you have a passport that allows you to travel to Iran. If you are not on the side of Darius's story, and if you don't believe that a magical shapeshifter took on the form of Bardia, the king, after killing him and was trying to usurp the throne for himself with his shape-shifting powers, then you are a liar. And you are a part of darkness and a part of the lie. Okay, obviously, I'm pretty skeptical of Darius's story there. However, what I do think is important is the effect that this huge emphasis on purge the lie, tell the truth, purge the false narrative, promote the true narrative. This set of values, even if it was born out of something pretty compromised, was inflicted empire-wide. Darius, and then, of course, his son and grandson, Xerxes and Artaxerxes, their whole claim depends on people embracing this notion of rejecting lies, outing lies, and embracing truth. Well, all of the Jewish subjects of Persia, they're exposed to this same language for a couple, maybe 3 generations by the time we get to the material we're looking at in Nehemiah chapter 9 in 444 BC. Now, you might think to yourself, well, that's not that long, but think about the values that are held dear at any given time in your country, in my country right now. It doesn't even take a full generation to make brand new values happen. Go watch a movie or a comedy from the mid-2000s. The jokes are completely different. The values are completely different. Things that now are absolutely sacred and cannot be questioned or criticized were the subject of humor and jokes that everybody laughed at and treated as absurd just 15 or 20 years ago, 10 years ago, for that matter. No. Values change very quickly. I don't just mean values that flip from, we totally believe this, now we totally reject that. I mean emphases on values shift very quickly as well. And this value of the true narrative must be embraced and promoted. It is moral to do so, and only an immoral person would promote a false narrative, is one that had been drilled for the better part of a century into the minds of Persian citizens and subjects by the time we get to 444 BC in the events of Nehemiah chapter 9. In this way, my friends, I kind of think Persia did a little bit of a favor to the Jewish people who are on screen here, finally admitting to God that his version of the story is true and that their narratives are false. I think this generation of Jewish people lived in a time where, even if they got there in kind of a weird way, was still a time where truth was idealized and seen as moral and virtuous. And I think what they're doing here in Nehemiah 9 is obviously, it's a movement of God. That's how it's held out. That's how I read it. But also, if there's a God who's all-powerful and is in control of all things, like the God of the Bible is held out as being, he has some sort of notion of the fullness of time and how to use the eras and the moments and the cultural movements, and both positively and negatively, to achieve what he wants. In this case, I think the God of the Bible is harnessing the Persian culture-wide emphasis on outing the lies and embracing the truth for the benefit of his people. And with that in mind, let's just read another chunk of this big corporate prayer of admitting God's narrative was right all along, this big corporate prayer of confession that the descendants of Abraham are saying here in the Persian era of the Bible in Nehemiah 9, starting in verse 13. You came down on Mount Sinai. You spoke to them from heaven. You gave them regulations and laws that are just and right, and decrees and commands that are good. You made known to them your holy Sabbath and gave them commands, decrees, and laws through your servant Moses. In their hunger, you gave them bread from heaven, and in their thirst, you brought them water from the rock. You told them to go in and take possession of the land you had sworn with uplifted hand to give them. But they, our forefathers, became arrogant and stiff-necked, and they did not obey your commands. They refused to listen and failed to remember the miracles you performed among them. They became stiff-necked and in their rebellion appointed a leader in order to return to their slavery. But you are a forgiving God, gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love. Therefore you did not desert them, even when they cast for themselves an image of a calf and said, "This is your God who brought you up out of Egypt," or when they committed awful blasphemies. Because of your great compassion, you did not abandon them in the desert. By day, the pillar of cloud did not cease to guide them on their path, nor the pillar of fire by night to shine on the way they were to take. You gave your good spirit to instruct them. You did not withhold your manna from their mouths, and you gave them water for their thirst. For 40 years you sustained them in the desert. They lacked nothing. Their clothes did not wear out, nor did their feet become swollen. There was a movement going on at this time. It was bigger than the Jewish people. It was Persian culture wide to say, idealize the truth and dispense with the lies. And it's against the backdrop of that cultural nudge or idealization of truth that the descendants of Abraham here are boldly and loudly in unity declaring this great truth that they and their ancestors had denied with their words and their actions in generations past. Also, we've just about got the mailing that we're sending out to say thank you to everybody who supports the program at any level, on any platform. That mailing is almost already done. It's all labeled. We got a little note in each of those that I wrote. We have got a notebook in there that says Galatians on it. Looks real cool. I think it'll come in very handy for the next season we do on the book of Galatians. And we have got that coveted, limited edition, awesome looking, my friend Bethany designed it. It's beautiful, Nehemiah sticker that is going to go into each of those mailings as well. Those stickers are meant to commemorate a moment in our lives, a rite of passage, time we spent together. And I think the art is worthy of it. Bethany did a great job. Anybody who supports at any level is going to get a special limited edition gold outline version of that. And a small handful of people who've just gone way above and beyond are going to get a super special, mega limited edition hologram version of that sticker to add to your collection. My crazy hope is that those things keep stacking up somewhere real cool for you, and that every time you look at those things, you remember a book of the Bible that you did the work to get in your hip pocket. Again, everybody who's supporting at any level on any platform is going to get that. There's still time to sign up. I haven't taken that to the post office yet, and I've seen a handful of people signing up over the last few days. We're printing labels to get you into this round of mailing as well, because I really want you to get that Nehemiah sticker and the Galatians notebook ahead of the next season. I think it's important. Thank you so much to all of you who support this thing. It literally would not exist without you. I'm really, really grateful. All right, that's plenty. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.